Hey Aries, how's it going? My name's Alex. I think the Oracle and I might have something interesting for you today. Do you often eat oranges, maybe? Or do oranges have a significance for you in your life? Because what I saw in your meditation was just an orange tree. And it was just there. The image never changed, it never developed into anything else, didn't come along with anything. Just a lone orange tree in the middle of a grassy field. Or maybe an empty orchard or something. I don't know too much about the symbolism of oranges. Don't even know where they grow or where the original orange tree is from, But maybe that location has something important to do with you, or orange symbolism in general might be something interesting to look into. But that was it. Your whole meditation was just this lovely orange tree, and it had oranges on it, and it seemed like it was in the middle of the summer. It was a nice day, a nice atmosphere. Just a bunch of oranges hanging off of it, fully green leaves, and looked like a good, healthy tree. I don't know. And I pulled a hexagram for you from the I Ching, and we got hexagram number 41, decreasing, changes to hexagram 4, childhood. We have an image of a mountain over a lake. Those are the sort of elemental symbols that make up this hexagram. And this hexagram of decreasing is about decreasing what is below in order to increase what is above. So the first thing I think of in this regard is with spiritual matters. We can decrease distractions in our lives, we can decrease our worldly desires and increase our spiritual power, essentially, or our spiritual wisdom. If we stop seeking money so much, for example, we can spend more time working on our minds or something like that. It could be anything like that, decreasing what is lower to increase what is higher, decreasing what is material in order to increase what is spiritual. The mountain above lake symbolism shows a lake that decreases in order to increase the mountain. So we have a lake that evaporates, that water forms clouds over the mountain and then rains on the mountain. So what is a decrease for the lake is an increase for the mountain. And basically something excessive needs to be decreased and something that is lacking needs to be increased. And it's kind of like a spring cleaning, like a purging and a making room for things, and a reorganization, a reprioritization, an economization. Perhaps there's something that you need to economize, or you need to reorganize your budgets. It could be something as simple as that. It could be putting more emphasis on something and less emphasis on something else. It could be getting rid of certain distractions so you can increase your activity elsewhere. Also, what comes to mind is, if you have a watering can full of water, it's not useful. You need to pour the water out. You need to decrease the water from the watering can and pour it out onto your garden. This idea of decreasing is not, it sounds like a negative thing. Like if you were to pull this just out of the I Ching randomly and get, decreasing, what is this? Well, after abundance, decrease happens. And after collecting and accumulating, a decrease inevitably happens. And it's just a natural part of life. And a decrease of something, of a resource, of a useful resource, it just means putting it to good use. In this case, we have a changing line for you, the very first line at the bottom. And so this is really denoting something lower needs to be decreased, and something must be used to better effect. It has to be put in a higher order of things, instead of just hoarding it or holding on to it or letting it clutter up your life or letting it sit and collect dust or letting the water sit in the watering can and become stagnant. It has to be used. And when we have the very bottom line that decreases itself, it's a yang line that becomes a yin, that changes to a yin line. So that's like lightening your load. And here we have other people involved. It's like when you lighten your load, you set an example for others to perhaps lighten their own loads, to ease their own burdens. You can set an example of how to utilize what you have and how to put it to good use, how to maybe work smarter, not harder. That could be part of this, is like decreasing your workload to increase your leisure time. It could be like that. So like thinking about decreasing, it's not just like, oh my God, I'm losing something, there's a loss of something. Don't think of it as a loss, think of it as a purging of stuff that either you do not need or that can be put to better use. And also, this changing line is like you taking a step back from your own affairs and paying so much attention to your own stuff will allow others to prosper and flourish. So there's something you can let go of that will help the people around you. Maybe, this is just an example, it might not apply to you, but maybe there's like some money you could give or some gifts you could give or something like that. Maybe there's some time that you could spend with people, and you can decrease your own personal time, increasing the time you spend with others, and help them with something. It could be anything like that. Decreasing something of yours to increase what others have seems to be important, but you have to be very cognizant of thinking about like how much can you spare, how much is okay for you to spare. You know, don't overexert yourself or don't overgive. You know, make sure you keep it in a healthy balance, because here the idea of lightening your load to set an example for these other people is important. So you're not like setting a bad example by overgiving or overexpending yourself or over economizing or starting to nickel and dime yourself, or you know, burning down the house to clean the kitchen or whatever that saying is. Like, you don't have to do that much. You have to focus, like, what is a good example? How can I appropriately lighten my load in a balanced way that can inspire other people to lighten their load as well? And yeah, again, that working smarter, not harder comes through again. There might be something with that. You know, when I think of that orange tree in the field, like it was in an empty field, which it can be very, very difficult to grow trees in an empty field or in an orchard. Maintaining an orchard is notoriously difficult because trees and most plant life don't exist outside of like an integrated, diverse ecosystem. To do monocultural farming, that means to grow one thing. Like, we do a lot of monocultural farming in the world where we have a whole field that's just for corn. We have a whole orchard that's just for apple trees or something like this. It's when you dedicate a whole section of earth to growing just one thing. It's extremely difficult and counterproductive to do that because it requires a lot more water, a lot more resources, fertilizer, and all sorts of stuff, pest control and everything like that. It's a lot of work. But you can do polyculture or permaculture, which is putting a bunch of different things together. So you can have an apple tree next to near a walnut tree, and around that you put some comfrey plants, and then around that some raspberries, and between all that stuff, maybe some ears of corn, some patches of wheat, and you have like, some tomatoes surrounding the wheat. You know, there's all these different plants, and then put some beans in between everything, plant some legumes all over and some potatoes, which will like put nitrogen back in the earth. And the comfrey, the leaves fall off and put fertilizer and nitrogen back in the earth, while also mulching and keeping moisture. The leaves kind of stay on top and decompose slowly, but keep the moisture in the soil. And the tomatoes bring some acidity into the soil so that the pH can be balanced properly. And the wheat attracts fungus and mycelium to its roots, the good type of fungus that helps distribute nutrients throughout the soil. So all these plants work together, and then the farmer does way less work. The reason we use monoculture is because we like to use the big machines that harvest things all at once. So you can just run through a field of wheat with a giant like thresher, or you can run through a field of tomatoes with something. or people sitting on the back of a truck just reaching out and picking tomatoes really quickly, and it's super, super fast to do a harvest with monoculture. It's technically easier when harvest time comes, instead of going through all the separate little plants in a polycultural field where it's like, okay, I gotta just focus on the wheat and I have to walk around this whole food forest just to get a few bits of wheat. And then, you know, tomorrow I gotta do all the tomatoes, and it's a lot more difficult to pick through it. But it is a superior form of growing food because you maintain the health of the soil, and you maintain the water in the ground, and you bring better nutrients into the food that you're going to consume, because these foods tend to share nutrients when their roots are close together, and when, you know, the beans are putting nitrogen back into the earth, the wheat picks it up, the pear tree picks it up, all that sort of stuff. And so you actually grow healthier food as well. So when I saw an orange tree by itself in the field, I had this kind of instinct of like, that's not right. That needs stuff around it, that needs more plant life around it. Otherwise, like, you're gonna have to tend to that tree a whole lot in order to make sure it lives. So there's something like that where you have to decrease your workload, and so there might be some work that you have to do, or some resources that you have to put together in a certain way, and it might feel like a big expenditure of resources, like planting a food forest and setting up the soil in your land to make a polycultural, permacultural food forest is a long and difficult process. For example, in my 20s, I lived in a town full of eco-villages and permaculturalists, and when setting up a new plot of land for a person or a group of people, it could take us 3 to 6 years just to prepare the land and get it like ready to go, and you know, slowly adding different plants, taking different plants away. We had to do succession, so you let weeds grow for 2 years and then till the weeds. It's like, so you could break up the soil. There's so much waiting and prep work, and it's a big expenditure of time and resources. But once you do that, once you spend those resources and set up the foundation for it, those things work for themselves. Like, you have to water them like once every 2 weeks, maybe once a month. A food forest, imagine that. Farmers have to water their fields several times per day. We have huge industrial hose and sprinkler systems that use up so much water from the aquifers, and they're just being watered all day, every day. Imagine having to water a field once every 2 to 4 weeks. You know what I mean? It's like so much better. It does its work for you. You just sit back and let it ride. But getting it started is a huge expenditure of resources and time. So maybe you gotta look into something like that. That was like a very drawn out metaphor or analogy. Or perhaps you are trying to get into permaculture, in which case, get going. I know it's winter in the Northern Hemisphere now, which is a time to prepare the land in certain ways. Look at what you can do in the winter for permaculture. Well, now we're getting too literal. That's for some of you. But there are things you can do in the winter, things you can prepare for. Anyway, I'm going to pull some cards for you so we can develop this a little bit further. I don't know why I wanted to talk about permaculture so badly. Maybe someone needed to hear that. But we're gonna focus on an aspect of life. One of these 24 symbols will be indicated by this coin I'm going to spin, and that'll be the aspect of life that the Oracle wants us to focus on. What does Aries need to know? Ooh, landed upside down. Second time. What does Aries need to know? The nurse. All right, we have the archetype of the nurse. I've got it symbolized by like a heart rate monitor, one of those like pointy little lines. But yeah, the nurse, it's like a caretaker, you know. That's like a selfless person, that's a healer, particularly like literal, physical, biological healing, but it could also be consolation and comfort. The nurse is a comforter. The nurse is also representative of midwives, or people who help raise children or give birth to children. but there's some, it's like an assistant, like a very, very loving assistant who's also very knowledgeable about how to properly assist. It's like someone who assists and knows what they're doing. So what does Aries need to know about decreasing and the nurse aspect of their lives, the nurse aspect of reality? Maybe you're a nurse. You gotta figure out how to triage some resources, decrease some things in one part of the hospital and increase them in another part. Could be as simple as that, I don't know. It's this one. The Seven of Swords. Unstable effort. This deck has some interesting little lines of words sometimes on some of these cards, and it says unstable effort here. So the Seven of Swords is like an Aquarian. I think it's Venus. Yeah, Venus in Aquarius. Maybe your Venus is in Aquarius. Oh my God, mine is. And here, this guy, he's in a camp, which this is a little bit different from the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith tarot deck, where they're in like a fighting arena or something, or outside of a castle wall. So this would be like someone in the siege camp, who, you know, this army is besieging a castle, right? And they're preparing for the battle that's to come eventually. And this guy is like taking their weapons. He's decreasing their capabilities of carrying out their siege. Or maybe he thinks some other group within that same military needs the weapons, but didn't ask for permission to take them, and is using his own judgment and volition to insubordinate himself, and thinking he's doing something good might in fact be causing a problem. Although it might solve a problem for the guys who didn't have swords, it's now creating a new problem for those whose swords he took. So if there are resources that you're redistributing and moving around, make sure all the stakeholders, all the people who are involved with those resources understand what it is you're doing. Don't make a move that some stakeholders are unaware of, because there might be something that you're unaware of. You might not have all the information needed to move these resources, and you might make an unfortunate mistake if you move resources abruptly without really considering all of the people involved and exactly how much of this resource you can move. Part of that changing line in the I Ching is like really focus on how much can you spare. You should economize, and you should decrease what's excessive to increase what is insufficient, but within reason and within the proper limitations of all concerned. Let's develop this further. Let's pull another card for you. But yeah, the intention of this Seven of Swords, of this guy taking some swords away, is to help someone. It's not like the super shady Seven of Swords that you get in a lot of readings. This is someone who's got good intentions. They just might not have all the facts, might not have all the logistics set up properly. So just make sure that the logistics are set up correctly before you make a move. Just put all the ducks in a row. That's it. That's really all this is saying. It's not that shady. Like, it seems like an okay thing. Like, if you made this mistake, people would be like, oh, I get it. I see why you did that. But you can avoid the mistake. You don't have to make it. And then everyone will be like, oh, you took the initiative to do that. That was fantastic. Great work. So here we have questioning. And here it's two feathers with what looks like a rune. I never really know what this symbol means that's between these feathers. It's like a reverse rune with an extra line, like a reverse A with an extra line. So maybe like an E. It could be like a Slavic style E from medieval Slovenian, like Proto-Slavic languages. So maybe the letter E has significance, or maybe the letter A, or a strange letter A that has an extra line, maybe an A followed by an L, or an A followed by an I, or something like that. that could be significant. But anyway, these feathers are turned upright. There's two of them. They're making sort of X shape. And questioning, the first thing, the Latin for questioning in this is questio, and that is more than just questioning. That's like questing, seeking something. This is really like seeking an answer. And feathers are usually indicative of our spiritual nature or more numinous nature. And seeking answers from a higher source could be important to you at this point. Like seeking spiritual guidance might be really, really important for this moment in your life. Like how can I properly help? What can I decrease that's not too much of a tax on me, that's not going to be a detriment to me, but I can decrease and spare to help others. You might be seeking like an intuitive answer to this. If it's not such a logical, clear-cut thing, if it's like you're trying to, sacrifice some time, sacrifice some mental energy or something like that, sacrifice some effort in that way, it can be harder to quantify those more numinous aspects of ourselves. So like how much of our desires can we sacrifice without, becoming miserable? How much of our thought power and mental energy can we sacrifice without burning ourselves out? So you might be seeking higher guidance on how to properly balance that, because if we have some of these things in excess, it can be good to use it for other people, if your cup overfloweth. So you might be seeking assistance in just how to regulate this extra energy you've got and give some of it, use it well without overstepping boundaries, without burning yourself out, and without taxing yourself too much. I mean, that seems kind of clear. I feel like I shouldn't explain that anymore. I feel like that's the interpretation for you. So here I'm going to pull one last thing for you, Aries. One token for Aries. Questioning, Seven of Swords, the Nurse, decreasing. This one. Saturn and the number 9. The planetary symbol for Saturn and the number 9. So for some of you, you have an excess of money and you don't know what to do with it. Maybe Saturn's been very good to you and you've got a good bit of wealth, but you're not a greedy person. Saturn hates greedy people, by the way, even though greedy people call upon Saturn all the time. He has a way of sorting them out, let's say. And you don't want to be sorted out by Saturn. I get that feeling. So you might be thinking, okay, like what sort of charities should I give to? The holidays are occurring now, Christmas, New Year, all this stuff. I think Hanukkah starts the day after Christmas this year. And we get put into a giving mood, generous mood. And Saturn, this is actually where Santa Claus comes from. Saturn, the Father Time, right? Father Christmas. The Romans called Christmas, the solstice, this festive series, this festive time of year, Saturnalia. And it was symbolized by a bearded old man wearing a red suit who gave gifts to everybody. And you might be literally thinking like, how can I treat my friends and family to good gifts this year? And you got to make sure that you don't put yourself in the poorhouse because you're feeling overly generous. But you are in a position to do that this year. If that's something you've always wanted to do, is to like show your material generosity to those around you, you can do it this year, and you're apparently in a good position to do so. Just don't overdo it. Don't do it to your detriment. Save something for yourself so you can eat and pay your bills. We all desire to be very generous to the people we love, but I think the people we love would not want us to put ourselves in the doghouse, or the poorhouse rather. Also, this Saturn is the hope of people who are seeking salvation, essentially. Like, Saturn, the planetary spirit of Saturn, who I like to refer to as Erythiel, although that planetary spirit has many names, Phanuel and so forth, is like the custodian of wild places. And this reminds me of the permacultural analogy I was coming up with before, is that like the planetary spirit of Saturn blesses those who engage in permaculture, because Saturn kind of hates civilization, or hates it when human civilization disturbs nature, and he likes the untouched natural places. But when he sees people doing permaculture or being custodians of nature and caring for nature in such a way that it's almost wild, like permaculture and polyculture are mimicking natural systems, and it's just utilizing the natural systems to the best of their abilities, like putting all these different systems together so that they flourish naturally. So it's like enhancing what's already there in nature, and Saturn truly blesses people who engage in that sort of mimicry of the natural systems, preservation of the wilderness, honoring of the wilderness. So that might be important to you. Like you could be a helper of wild things, of plants and animals. Maybe you are working for the Department of Natural Resources and you've got a special project and you're trying to figure out like how can I work with this pollution site, or how can I, help bring back this river, or like this river has too many dams in it. How can I, shift these resources around to bring life back to the river, let the salmon get upstream, all that sort of stuff. You might be looking for assistance and trying to spread resources that way. And other, I think the final interpretation for the Saturn thing is basically just like being severe with yourself and being severe with your boundaries. You might have to shift your boundaries, either put up stronger ones or expand them. Maybe you've grown a little bit too big for where your current borders and boundaries are, and it's time for your borders and boundaries to expand a bit. And Saturn is the ruler of borders and boundaries. We know him as someone who restricts and constricts us with borders and boundaries, but he's also the guy who opens the boundaries up and widens them when we need him to. So perhaps you need to ask for your borders and boundaries of your life, your territory that you have responsibility over, to be expanded a bit at this time. And then you'll see how you can economize your life when you have a little bit extra room to move things around. And I think you're gaining that extra room. Or it could just be that you have to clean out what's in that, because perhaps this could be for others who are watching that your borders are not prepared to be expanded just yet. You just need to clear out space, and then you'll find like, oh, you don't need your borders to be expanded yet. There's a lot of stuff in here that I don't need, and like you clear out clutter, and then you realize like, oh, I got this whole extra room now that I can build something in. Oh my God, I didn't even realize I had this whole room here. Once I cleared all this stuff out, well, now I can create something that I needed. I thought I needed to expand my borders. In fact, I don't. I just had to decrease what was excessive. So yeah, just making room in your life. Yeah. All right, Aries, I think that's all the Oracle and I have for you today. I hope this is at least entertaining for you, but thank you so much for stopping by. I always appreciate you hanging out with me. I wish you all the best, and I'll see you next time.